BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. So today we're going to be doing our mini upload on Fritz Haarmann, who was a serial killer that lived in Germany in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Now, I have to reiterate that point that this is a mini upload, so it's not going to be the biggest deep dive research thing. I just had kind of encountered this one because I had posted our upload today, the larger one, on Jens Söring, who was a German national who was accused of murder in the United States. And the first suggested video that came up was about this individual named Fritz Haarmann. I had never heard of him before, but I began to do a little bit of reading on him, as well as watching a few videos. There are a lot of things about him in German, but as much as I like to pretend at cocktail parties, I'm not fluent in German, so I got to read the English language sources. And what I just began to notice is pattern after pattern. And to help us out with this one here, we're on a website called The Criminal Code, talking about Fritz Haarmann, who is known as the Butcher of Hanover, otherwise known as the Vampire Killer of Hanover. Fritz Haarmann was actually born Friedrich Heinrich Karl Haarmann in 1879 in Hanover, Germany. He was the last of 6 children born to Joanna and Ollie Haarmann. While reports exist that Ollie married the elder Joanna only for her money, the evidence indicates that the couple was still quite poor. Ollie was described as cantankerous and cold toward the family, while Joanna babied young Fritz to the point of embarrassment. First pattern number 1 that we see with serial killers. Antisocial behavior is developing as a result of lack of bonding with the parents, especially the cold behavior expressed by the father, as well as not having a genuine bond with the mother. Like if the mother's doing things to him that is making him feel embarrassed. There was even this one video online that actually came from Camille Paglia when she said that it's like emotional instability in young males is a result of 2 major things. Number 1 is having a father that is present but not involved, and a mother that is extremely overbearing. And really it should be in the reverse order, like the mother that is extremely overbearing, and she also says the word flamboyant. And as you see here, absolutely flamboyant, because they would go on to say in this article that she would dress Fritz up in his sister's clothes. She would teach him needlepoint and, being like forced to wear like girls' clothes and such. In short, she was kind of using him as a doll. And this is what leads to emotional instability in young males. Earlier on this channel, though, we had talked about John Wayne Gacy and Jeffrey Dahmer last week, and you see a lot of the similar patterns here, just how antisocial behavior is forming. First and foremost, it's the lack of bonding between the parents and the children, and the individual child, actually. So Fritz goes to school, and then he is very much involved with things just like spacing out, daydreaming. He can't really focus. He's not a good student. But one of the things they describe is he actually had fairly good behavior. He was like kind of well behaved. He just couldn't focus, and he was very big on spacing out. And I mean, I think that they really blow those details out of proportion when it comes to these serial killers, because I don't know about you, I was always kind of the spaced out person who's always looking out the window, especially around age 9 or 10. And I mean, countless people are. That just because you're like into daydreaming and stuff doesn't mean that you are going to be a budding serial killer, but they almost make you feel that way when you're growing up. But he had medical problems, he suffered full-on seizures, as well as just kind of just like losing consciousness. So he had a lot of things that were going on with this as well. But the thing is, though, Fritz's kind of behavior just seems to be very, very much similar to that of what we saw with Jeffrey Dahmer, except for the fact that, as we see here in this article, Fritz was shipped off to a mental asylum after his 18th birthday, like just after he turned 18, and the treatment at the asylum was something that Fritz Haarmann would never forget, and he spoke of it, though, that it was just sheer torture. And, well, this just goes to show you that power corrupts, and medical professionals who are not being closely examined have that type of power. Of course, corruption wouldn't be immune from things like mental institutions, because the patients are in vulnerable places. They aren't really in a good place to fight back. But one of the ways that Fritz got out of this was his own mother, the one who babied him so much, helped him escape from the mental institution, and he went on to Switzerland actually and worked in a shipyard. But by this point, though, it's like in life, Fritz had really gone into kind of a downward spiral of destructive behavior. He was a homosexual, and first and foremost, serial killers operate within their own sexual orientation. And there's a big thing that we need to say about that, though, but it's like there's also this kind of concept of feeling a certain sense of sexual inadequacy that is going on, or just feeling like you're some sort of sexual deviant and reject. How many times have we talked about rejection from society on this channel? Now, in 2019, the time of this recording, being a homosexual wouldn't really be something that is so socially deviant, but back in the early 20th century, maybe even Jeffrey Dahmer, was he really just felt like kind of shame and remorse and just embarrassment because of his homosexuality, and he really had to hide that from other people. With Fritz Haarman, it really goes on to become the same thing. So his kind of sexual deviant behavior happened in his teen years. He was somebody who was starting to molest younger boys, and Fritz was actually the victim of molestation as well as a kid. He was molested by a teacher at the school. Once again, remember, he was kind of had model behavior, but he was just kind of like spaced out, so he was molested by one of his teachers. And that just goes to show you antisocial behavior, lack of bonding with the parents, sexual abuse. He was the victim of sexual abuse. And I mean, the long story short is, as we said, this will be a mini upload. He went on to murder 27 people, mostly young males. The exact method that he went about it was biting them on the Adam's apple, which, like, and sometimes he would even bite them so hard that the blood would just pour out. And it was just very vicious, and that's why he's known as the Vampire of Hanover, or the Butcher of Hanover, the Vampire Killer. It's just absolutely disgusting things. But he was a pedophile. He was somebody who would lure men back to his apartment, just kind of buy them food and drink and such. Also the same stuff that we see with John Wayne Gacy and the same stuff we see with Jeffrey Dahmer and perhaps other serial killers as well. There's an interesting thing, though, about Fritz Haarman is that even though he is described as a serial killer who targeted almost exclusively young males, or rather he did target exclusively young males, he actually married a woman and fathered a child with her. Now, this is something that you can kind of interpret in a number of ways. For example, John Wayne Gacy was very open about sexuality. John Wayne Gacy simply said that he was a bisexual, and he was very, very open about that. And Jeffrey Dahmer didn't father any children because he was most likely just a homosexual. And the thing is, though, someone once told me, it's like, do you ever know any stories about, like, a gay guy, and the guy tried it with a woman? And when I was in college once, somebody told me, if a guy is able to perform and have conventional intercourse with a woman, he's at least bisexual. So it's possible that Fritz Haarman was indeed a bisexual, but just sexuality can function in sort of a mild spectrum. But the thing is, though, is that, I mean, what we can really just say about this is all the patterns of a serial killer: sexual frustration, rejection from society, lack of bonding with the parents, victim of sexual abuse, and then just recreating the cycle of destructive behaviors. This is all partnered with some things that he just had from a very young age: the antisocial behavior, as well as just really just like having a very difficult like ability to interact with people, and not really knowing how to kind of control that sort of sexual rage and such. But yes, he was kind of eventually caught, and then they decided to kind of give him the death penalty. He was actually executed via the guillotine in 1925, and they have a memorial near the Göttingen Medical School for the victims. Now, I mean, this was just intended to be our mini upload for the day. It is something, though, that we should also note, is that they have one last line here where they say that Fritz Haarman appeared to lack anything close to a sense of empathy. In short, that he really just seemed to lack a lot of empathy. He sounds like a psychopathic torture serial killer, like level 22 on Dr. Michael Stone's Hierarchy of Evil. And it's all the makings of a serial killer just compressed into one. These things know no boundaries. And this was not intended to be a super detailed upload. This is just kind of something that we should be talking about, because it seems that this stuff does have a pattern, and there are these patterns of destructive behavior. I'm not a psychologist, I'm not an expert on antisocial behavior in any way, but when you look at all the steps that we put forward, it just seems like that this guy had everything coming together at once. But what do you think about anything that we put forward that Fritz Haarman was just a serial killer in the making, and all of the things, the antisocial behavior, the kind of emotional instability that was created by his mother and father, as well as being the victim of abuse and kind of feeling somewhat rejected from society because of his homosexuality. I mean, you even see other examples of people like Farley Llewellyn, who's the prime suspect in a case called the Mad Gasser of Mattoon that we talked about on this channel, who they believe that he kind of exerted his deviant behavior as a response to what? Closet homosexuality in the early part of the 20th century. So it's like, it's just like this stuff happens, and like this is, you have all the elements just coming together in one. And as we talk about a lot of these serial killer cases, you will see these patterns. But what do you have to say? I would love to hear from you if you have anything to say at all. Until next time.